This is Sally Wood for Be Inspired, and today I'm going to show you how to make a tea cushion, this style of tea cushion, for the back of an armchair. It has its own little problems, which I hope I cover for you, and we'll see where we get to. I'm going to use this fabric. It's a lightweight. It's one of my favourites actually from a few years ago. What you need to do is centre the picture as well as you can. Now ideally this picture should move over. The reason it's slightly this way and the girls are more in the centre is because I don't have enough fabric to put on the side here. Sometimes with a fabric you just have to adjust it to what looks good. I'm thinking this here looks pretty nice. That looks like it's more or less in the centre of the back. I'll show you how to make a new pattern. If I push that into where the piping is, it should be that the center here is even, and then it should arc away along the side, so it should come away a little bit up here and give you a bit of shaping. Not a huge amount, just a little bit. I'm going to be following the piping because that's obviously where the stitch line is, and as I come around here there is no piping. Now personally I don't like that. I usually put piping in. On the front here, again no piping. They've taken the front of the fabric all the way down to where the zip is, which is here, and I don't like that either. So I'm going to put a line here across for where my piping's going to go. Having decided where I want the pattern, I'm going to take my pins and I'm just going to pin along where the piping goes, and they kind of fall out, so just make sure that they are really secure in there. I usually put them in 2 or 3 times to make sure that they're held in place, and that you can see my first pin's here on the edge and then this one comes around, and that should be the same for the top. Let's work that one in. Sometimes you've got to just smooth the fabric. So now I'm going to work my way round to the front here. What I'm going to do for the front is I'm just going to put my fingers where the seam is and just put the pins in that shape. You can use dressmaking pins if you want. I use a combination now. I've got all sorts of things lying around. So there's that one. This is time consuming, but you do get in general a really good look. As you see, after a while the shape of the cushion starts taking shape. Now I usually put piping on. I think it looks neater and more finished, so I will be doing that. So that's this side almost finished. Because there isn't any piping along or any seam, I'm just going to put it on the corner, and seeing as the gentleman doesn't care what I'm doing as long as it's done, I am free to do my own thing. So I'm just going to put it on the corner, or what I seem to think is the corner, all the way along. I can straighten this line up later. As long as I've got the corner on both where I want it, I can make a straight line. So I've gone all the way along to the edge here. Now something I didn't point out to you is if you feel that your fabric's going to twist, then just pin the fabric to your cushion. I sometimes do that on awkward shaped cushions, but having been doing this a long time, I don't tend to bother these days. Alrighty, so now I'm going to roll off some more of the fabric so I can actually twist things around. And as you can see, there's my line of pins here, and I'm just going to carry on going around here. I can actually feel where the seam is with my fingers, so I don't have to look. You could measure it, I suppose, and work it all out, but at least here you know that this cushion's going to fit. And slowly work your way into this corner and along the piping too. I've been working my way along the back, pinning to where the join is on the piping, as I had on this side. As I come to the corner, I have to make just a few little adjustments. They've got like a double plate here, which I'm going to put back in. I'm going to pull the fabric into where I think the corner is. And I'm going to pin it down like that, which means that the corner is held firm as I pin into the corner here and back into the corner here. Now this has just given me a basic shape that I'm going to be using to make the cushion cover. I'm going to cut very generously across the bottom. So I'm going to be cutting about 1 inch down from my pins so that if I have to alter anything, I can. There we go. It's better to be too generous than too tight, because there might be some alterations when I'm folding it and cutting it around. And again here, I'm going to be cutting out to the side like that, and then I'm going to give about 1.5 inches on this side. Now where I put the fold down for the pleat, I'm just going to take the pin out. Actually, I'm going to kind of pull it against itself, so hopefully there'll be nice big holes on the other side. So I'm just going to pull that one up like that, put it back exactly the way it came out, and there's my holes on the other side. So that's that. Another way to do it is like this. Here's my pin, and there's where I want it on the other side. So I can actually put a pin in through along there, and then when I remove this one, the other one is still in place like that. Let's open it. So I've still got the 2 pins there. It's very important that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fold it, because I want to make sure that both sides of the cushion are equal. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to put my pins like that on top of each other. So that's my bottom corner. As usual, I've got a pin right where I don't want it, so I'm actually going to remove that one. That one doesn't matter anymore. In its place, I'm going to put a little clip like that. It's quite a deep clip, but it doesn't actually go across where my stitch line is. This is just in case I need to cut back, which I will do. So I've got my corners in place here, which I'm going to pin. I don't usually pin, I'm pinning it for your benefit. So those are in place. Keeping it all straight, I'm going to start pulling this around so that the warp and weft threads look straighter. The thread that I'm more interested in, that's the one that goes all the way up through the fabric. And as I get there, I'm going to start twisting the fabric like that. I think that looks even. As long as it looks even. If it was a stripe, it would be really easy to tell by, but I don't have a stripe, I'm just relying on these threads. So there's my top, and as I pull that out, you'll see where it goes. I was shown this years ago. I'm going to trim up to 1/2 inch here, because that's where I want my base to be. Take that out, don't need that anymore. Now I'm going to see underneath where this curve goes. This pin here is here, but it's a little bit further back here. But on the whole, that flows. It looks like it's actually in line. I'm going to just trim up to within 1/2 inch of the top. It'll be fine with the piping, and that takes me to the next part. Just smooth it out. I'm going to roll the top here just so it won't wriggle too much. And now I'm going to work up the side. I know that this was the outside of the piping, so I'm just going to see where all the pins are. And this one's in line, this one's in line, that one's slightly under but still within line. And then this one really folds round, and this one's quite straight, but I'm going to take it on the top. And here again, I'm going to do a normal 1/2 inch at the base there to the middle. Then I'm going to take it to a little bit of a tight 1/2 inch as I go up, which should compensate the difference between here and here. And there again, just cut it all the way up like that. Now for the top, unrolling it, everything else is in shape. And here again, I just check to see where my pins are along the top compared to the shape underneath. And I am going to cut that again within 1/2 inch because it looks pretty even. and it shapes round. Okay, so I'll just finish cutting that around. And that is the shape of my first cushion. I only have one to do. Now we're going to do pattern matching. So I'm smoothing out the pattern to be matched. All I'm going to do is lay this one on top. Then you don't have to go through all the rigmarole of doing it all again. So this one actually goes here. The pattern that you have just cut covers pattern that you're cutting. Sometimes if you're cutting a pattern next to it, it might be slightly different from the one that you've just cut. It's just the way they're printed. But I'm thinking that that might just about do it. That's a bit tight on the top, but I don't want to cut a new one. So long as it's as close as you possibly can make it, that's all that matters. I'm going to cut along here. Actually, I might just do it as a generous cut all the way around so I'm not dealing with so much fabric. Just need to make sure all of that is in line. That looks like it's in line. It's off the table, but I can assure you I'm making sure it's bigger than I need. Now I've got it to a size that's easy to use. I'll fold that up like that and then start cutting around where I need it to come from. My advice is always use the template that you have cut, which would be the top one, the first one, to cut all subsequent patterns. Because if you make an alteration on the next one down and you use that, then that alteration is automatically transferred to the next cover. Before you know it, you actually don't have any covers that really match. Sometimes if you use a fabric that a side-by-side fabric, which this wasn't quite, so it was easier to do this way. If I'd used the other side, the corresponding picture next to it, the selvage is here, so the whole pattern would have been altered completely, and that's not what I want. So let me go along here, and I'm also going to put in this little V so I know where it is. This is important. This is where the zip border's going in, so I want that to correspond. Move that over. It was a little bit more generous on this side, but that's okay. We'll cut that round like this, and then up the side. Just make sure that things are where they need to be. There's a little leaf here which I flip over, which is that leaf, so we're still in line. Roll that up and we'll sort the top out. On the top I know I'm a little bit tight, so where it's tight I'm actually going to put a pin. This is to remind me not to be generous on that part there, but I think the rest is okay. Anywhere else? No, that looks fine. In fact, when I take these pins out, my seam will be closer to the edge, which is where it needs to be. But I will put a pin in here as another reminder that it has to come in, and along here. I'm just going to straighten off this. I can actually see the way it's woven together. I'm going to do it this side, it'll be easier. So I'm actually following the way it was woven, and that will give me the straightest edge. I realise that's not always the case. The other way to do it is to fold the fabric down like that, selvage to selvage. I know it said 5 inches, but I'm actually going to cut it to 5.5, so it's a little bit tighter. In that case, all I would do is cut along the fold, keeping the borders to border, just carry on up here like this and then cut it back. So we'll see how straight I am in a minute. Having cut the 5.5 inch border, I'm literally just going to cut it in half like this, so I've got a piece for each side. But the easiest way to make sure you're doing the right border for the zip, fold it in half and then add 1/2 inch to it. So this is 2 3/4, so I actually need to have 2 lengths of 3 1/4 for the zip to go in. I've got this piece here with a straight edge. All I'm going to do is follow my ruler up 3 1/4 inches like this along the straight edge and cut up to it. I'm going to do this twice, so I've got the border for the zip to go in. Then cut the second one. Anything left on this scrap I can use as piping. I've just folded this at a 45-degree angle. Going to just cut along the fold like this. Now I'm just going to cut lengths of 1.5 inches. So there's one, and you can do this in multiple, so you don't have to do it one at a time. Cutting piping on the bias actually helps it go around curves a lot easier. And we've got a few curves on there that I don't want to be messing with, so I will cut a number of these up so that I've got plenty to use on the cushion. It's my first 3 lengths. That should do the outer side, and I'll carry on going until this is used up. Having cut the back cushions out and marked where the corners are, I'm going to just make a little nick there and there, which is at the end of these 2 needles here. I'm not actually going to do the same on this side, I don't think, because those look odd. So I will pop this over like this. I don't like where that one's almost there and that's way over there, but then this side is way over too. So I'm going to use the smaller ones to make the pattern and use these ones to mark the ones underneath so that they actually match. The only thing I'm going to do now is remove all of the pins from the top, which was the pattern that I used. I'm just going to make the piping up. I've got a selection of fabrics here which I'll put in my lap. I really don't care which way it goes. If you're going to see that, you can't see where the pattern is, so I'm not going to worry with this. Pop that on at right angles like that. Sew it on 2.6 because it's a cotton. And I'm going to go from that corner to this corner. Then I'll fold up the next one and pop on the next piece that I'm going to be sewing together. And I'm going to continue like that until I've finished all of my piping. Now I quite like to keep mine on loops. Sometimes obviously the lengths are longer, but this will be fine for this application. I'm going to swap out my sewing foot for a piping foot. It has a groove in it which helps the piping stay really nicely cinched in. I'm using 1/4 inch piping, which I'm going to pop in there like that and fold over and put it underneath the piping foot. Keep the raw edges together. I like to have about 1 inch or more of fabric and piping underneath so that it pulls through. I have the stitch set at the longest stitch, which is about number 5. All I'm going to do is let this pull through. When you're doing piping on a bias, it's very easy to get carried away and pull, and you can see it stretches out, so don't do that. Just pinch it together and let it pull through on its own. Because you want the fabric to go around corners like that, you don't want to have already pulled out the stretch. You can separate each section as you come to it like that. Having separated it, you need to open the seam out like that, put your piping across your seam and fold over. Just make sure that the seam remains open. It spreads the bulkiness out and makes it a smoother join. Carry on going. I have here the 2 pieces. There is one neck and there is the other neck, and all I'm going to do is find out where the center is, which should and is on that corner. So I'm going to flatten that corner out, I fold along here and bring that in level. And when I say level, this part has to be level. I'm not leveling it to there, otherwise it would distort it. So I'm leveling it so it makes a triangle like that. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. There's the neck, there's my fold. I'm going to bring that down so that both corners are brought together in a flat line and opposite the corner here. Slide that under. It is a bit fiddly, especially when it doesn't want to go under. Make sure everything's still lined up because it usually moves. You could pin it if you wanted to. I'm going to start my sewing just on the outside of the triangle. If I put my finger here, you might see where it dips down. So just on the outside of there, this still lines up. I'm going to put it, actually it can stay on a number 5, that's fine, because it's only for holding everything in. I've got the foot lined up on the outside edge of the fabric, like that, so it's 1/4 inch. Just so, all the way across. So that's one corner, and I can trim that back so that it's in line. Having done that, I'll do it to the next 3 corners. Now to sew the piping on the top. I've just cut back some of the piping. The reason is, when you put the piping on the side here, it comes up to about this area. So when I put my piping, when I start my piping on the top, I actually want that hard piece of piping to be behind that line. So I usually give it a good inch. 3/4 inch should be plenty, but I'm gonna start sewing here so it's all caught down, but the actual piping doesn't start to here. Just gives you a neater corner. Here again, you should have 1/2 inch seam allowance on the cushion. The piping might vary, it might sort of go backwards and forwards because it's not always exact. Sew it on the longest stitch, you don't need it to be nice and tight on here. It can be a generous 1/2 inch, it doesn't have to be exact. I'm coming to the first pleat, so it kind of wants to do its own thing. I'm just going to pull it in and make sure I've still got my 1/2 inch. Now as I come to it, I'm going to flatten everything out, make sure everything's going through where it should do. You need to, when you get there, start curling the piping out as a curve, and that will help all your fabric go in flat. Like that. And then you just carry on to the end of the cushion top. Come to the other end of the top. I'm going to cut it level with the bottom. Then I'm going to undo these stitches and cut the piping back to about 1 inch. Pop that down and then sew right to the end. Now the second side is face up. First side with the piping is face down. Sometimes with some of the fabric you need to sort of mix and match, but we'll see how we go. I have both bottoms at the end like that, matching that down. I'm going to reduce the stitch to a 3. Then the stitch where the needle is here, I'm going to bring across just a tiny bit, just 1 click. Some machines you can do that, others you can't. And then I'm going to start sewing. See where the beginning of the piping is here? Aim towards that. The raw edges of both seat cushions are together. The first test is if these 2 pleats actually match up. If they match up, then we're doing it the right way around. Sometimes if these don't match up, you need to start here and go the other way. We'll see where we get to. Now I'm going to pinch the pieces together where I want them. Should line up. Now I'm going to pull the top piece tight across the bottom because it seems a bit slack on the other side. I have to ease the fabric round, and it looks like it might be a little bit off, but I don't think it's going to be that bad. So now I've got all of the pleats from here underneath, all the pleats on the top, and I'm just going to guide it through if I can. I'm going to make my way to the second pleat, and hopefully they'll be the same. In the meantime, I'm going to hold on to that end there, find the middle here, and pinch where that is. Everything else should pull in doing that, and I can pull the top across the bottom if I think it's going to be too loose underneath. Having got close to the first pinch of fabric, again, I'm going to realign my pleats. There we are, like that. Pinch those, pinch halfway between the 2 like that. Make sure the raw edges are together, and again work towards that. Now I'm going to work towards the last pleat here. Pinch everything up together where you think it needs to be and ease your way around. The only thing with a piping foot is sometimes gets caught on the top pleat, so you sometimes have to pop your needle down, lift up, and then push the fabric back under, and it might get caught up here or that groove, so it's just the nature of it. Yeah, it has. So I'm going to lift it up a little bit and move it. Then I'm going to twist the fabric round and sew all the way to the end with the bottom ends matching. Now I've started putting the piping on, which I've placed quite close to the edge there, and I'm working along the bottom. It's 1/2 inch seam allowance again on the longest stitch. So I'm going to cut in like I usually do at a 45-degree angle like this, sew to the corner here, and hand crank it into place if need be. Leave the needle down, pivot the fabric underneath, fold back and pop it back into place. The piping automatically goes into the groove. Now here I'm going to be going round this corner, and the fabric's a little bit weighty, so I'm going to try to keep it up here so it doesn't pull down, and I'm going to start sewing again 1/2 inch distance. Do not pull this into a straight line, just let it do its own thing around the corner. So that I've got it there, I'll pinch it into place and sew. Pop it down, pinch it into place and sew. Now the only thing here is we've got quite a bit of fabric, so I'm actually going to open the seam like that. I'm going to have the piping going one way underneath and the piping on top going the other way. This is so that you spread the bulk. It's more important if you're using a really thick fabric. I usually do it that way so that the fabric underneath gets pulled in by the dog teeth, and so you shouldn't get held up. If you have it facing the other way and the piping's facing towards it, you sometimes just can't sew very easily. So that's why I've done that. Not only that, the piping on the top is here. So I have got plenty of space for the feet to go on round and not cause any problems. And I'm going to work my way down the other side. Again, just keep it in place, don't stretch it. I'm going to work my way all the way round. Now I'm coming to the second side. Open it up, make sure that all the bulk is one way and the piping is the other, and carry on sewing. Now it's quite often when you get to this point as you're going up on the plate that you have to readjust everything, just remember that. And I'm going to just carry on down to my join. Now I've come to the end of where I need to join it. Now I have a natural join here which I'm going to use, otherwise I've got another join here and I don't need it. So I am going to go over from this join about 1 inch. So that brings it to here, and that's what I'm going to cut. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this piece here because I don't need it. Cut along the stitches is the best way of doing it. Now I'm going to go a little ways beyond so that I can open the seam up nicely. I'm just going to cut that out along the stitches. So that's gone. I'm going to use that as my new seam. So now on the other side, I'm going to pull that out too. I'm going to lay that flat like that, and I'm going to put the piping forward, but I'm going to overlay that like that, and there's that's where I want my seam to be. So I'm going to go over about 1/2 inch to here, which if I fold that at right angles, if I've got all my measurements right, so having folded it over, that should be exactly where I want it. Fold that and that together. I think I did. By George, I've got it. So I'm going to use the original seam as my sew line. Clear the stitches, all those loose stitches out. Don't want those in there. Just make sure you've got them in line. I have twisted it in the past. Slot that under there to where the original seam line was. I should be pretty close. Adjust the stitch down to 2.6. stitch across. I'm going to double check that, so all I'm going to do is pull that apart like that. Looks like it's going to be okay. Might need to stretch it a little bit, but I shouldn't have to. Just slot the piping border underneath the piping foot. Then I'm going to just pop the piping into the fold and start stitching, but make sure you've lengthened the stitch. Adjust the fabric around it, that's the easiest thing. I'm going to cut it at a 45-degree angle, and then I'm going to pop this one on top and cut that also at a 45-degree angle. This should actually mean that the two go together and you have a smoother joint, which is really what you want in a thin fabric, just in case it shows. Then I'm going to just carry on sewing. The seam is flat. Push that in with my fingers. By doing it that way, it kind of smooths the join. And now I'm just going to sew that all in place. Like this. And it's not stretching the fabric or anything. Now I'm going to work on the zip border. So I'm just going to fold this over about 1/2 inch. Place the zip face down so the teeth are down. And I usually run the teeth along the fold of the fabric. I've also got the stitch length at 3. And I'm just going to make my way all the way along to the end. Try to keep it even, not really pulling anything, just make sure that both the end of the fold and the end of the side of your zip kind of marry up. When I get to the end, I'm just going to cut the zip across, starting with the zip on this side. Just pop that there for now. With the fabric, I'm going to fold over. Sometimes if you've got a fabric that has patterns, I usually try to match the pattern, but in this case it's not really relevant. And again, pop that up and in. And this time, if you can roll the fold of that on top of the fold, what I mean is it's just on top of the fold, it's not right on top. All the way down, you'll have a covered zip. Just make sure you get to the other end of the second side. Because I use continuous zipping, I now have to put the slide on. So first of all, I've got to work out where the top tooth is, which sometimes takes me a little minute, especially now my eyes aren't so good. There's the top tooth. So putting my top tooth on the left, I'm going to undo that a little way. Hopefully this won't take too long. Put the little handle thing down, slide it into place on the side that's the uppermost, and then slide this second side into it, and hopefully you can gauge where the top tooth is. And my experience is if you push that down like that, it should catch, and with a bit of luck my top tooth is right on there. That's good, because the other film I'd take ages doing it. Now the zip slide is on, I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm going to clip just a little bit on that side, turn it round and clip the center on the second side like that. Right, now I've got to shape these to go on the underside for the border. So what I'm going to do is, I haven't done this in a while, I'll go around there, so I'm going to fold that out like that. I am going to aim for the middle here. With a bit of luck that should be fine. It's just going to go up and round, it's only meant to be rough. So having done one side, I'm going to lay it down and take it a little bit lower and see if I can round it off a bit. Take a bit of the top off, that'll be fine. Perfect for the job that it needs to do. Put that down, put that one on top, about 1 inch or so back, and then I'm going to just roll this over and up about 1/2 inch. That will secure everything in place, and sew straight across. And repeat for the other side. Now for the border. I'm going to match up my center mark with the center. I'm actually going to pin it, which is quite unusual for me. and I'm going to work along to the corner. I'm only doing one side, the other side will work itself out. So there's one end here, and I'm just going to pop that round like that, so it's nice and tight. And I'm going to do the same the other way. Just pull it to the corner. I'm not pulling it tight or anything, I'm just letting it go to the corner, and then I'm going to fold it round the piping like I did on the other side. Just pop that in. Or maybe I will do both sides. So that's that side in. Now this, I am going to clip the top corner here, because that goes on the center line of the piping like that. This is very important, otherwise it won't work properly. And I'm going to pin on down using the center mark from here again to match that side, and pop all of that into place. I am going to clip the top corner here, and I'm going to pin on down. But because we're going around a circular edge, I'm going to pop that in at the top where it all lines up. Slide that underneath here like this. It's a little bit awkward, and that should all line up. The stitch length is on 3 and the stitch width is 3 as well, so that means the needle has moved into the piping. And all I'm going to do is very carefully and I hate this, is bring that round into a circle. I'm not going to be pulling this, I'm just going to be basically pushing it in to where it needs to go, like that. If you want, you could put like a stay stitch like you do for putting a sleeve in. That would work too, and it should work itself in. So don't pull it, just let it go in, just pinch it in as you go. Now I'm actually starting to go the other arc, and here again, don't stretch, just let the fabric do its own thing. And I'll make my way down the first side until I almost get to the bottom. Hopefully everything is straightening out as I go. I know that this has to fold up. It's not going to give very much of a pocket, but it will give a little bit, and it might be a bit contrary wanting to go up over here, but I'll hold it in place and see what happens. If it doesn't, fabric up and wriggle it under the foot. When you get towards the bottom, remove your first pin, straighten all of the border out. As you get to the corner, do the usual clip into it. This is why I don't really like doing it this way. And then just bring it on round to the front or the base of the cushion like that, and then sew on down. As I say, don't pull the fabric, just push it so it stays where it's meant to be. And it might wrinkle in places, but it should go in quite nicely. See, it's wanting to move this way, and I'm trying to keep it from doing so. If it bunches up too much, let it straighten out and then start again. And with a bit of luck, my centers will match, or if they've moved, they won't have moved too far. And I'm going to work towards the next corner and on round. I'm going to measure from the top of the fold there to the base here, which is about 3.5 inches. I'm going to put a mark here from 3.5 inches to where the fold needs to be. I'm going to measure from the top of this pleat to the bottom here, which is about 1.5 inches. I'm on the other side, and if I've got everything placed in right, this pleat here has to be 1.5 inches, which would be to here. So I'm actually going to double check it like that, and I'm going to pop a pin in it. I'm going to go sideways. Now I shouldn't actually sew over it, but just in case I couldn't get it out in time, there it is. So come around the corner. Here's the bottom of the pleat here, so I'm going to sew up, and I'm onto the pleat, so now I'm going to remove that. At that point, I'm going to readjust everything to make sure everything's where it needs to be. So I've got to the top of the pleat, and now I've got to work all of this in to finish with my clip at the top here like this on top of the seam here for the piping, and it might go in. With a bit of luck it's going to go in perfectly. Sometimes it doesn't. As I say, with a bit of luck it will all just go in. And I'm just pushing it in with my fingers. I'm not forcing it in, I'm not pulling it, just pushing it in and holding it tight with my fingers. Here we go. This isn't really how circles are done. They're usually done the other way up. Well, no, they're not. They are done this way. Okay, so now it's acting like a proper circle because I've come round this and I'm now into the circular part. So it should start acting accordingly. So if I pick that up, remove that pin because it seems to be blocking some fabric from moving. And I'm going to just pull the side of this up like this and let it pull in. Just do a few stitches at a time. Make sure everything's where it should be. Everything's lined in. Now that's kind of gone up a little bit. I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to start coming down the other side. So I'm just coming down towards the next pleat, pushing that fabric into place as I go, because I don't want to be stretching it. And just pull the fabric underneath, make sure nothing's being creased in and sewn on. So here we go, we're coming to the next pleat. If everything's right, it should be 1.5 inches deep, and it is. I did do well today. I maybe shouldn't have said that. It'll all go to pot now. It's actually measuring the right length. I'm going to remove my pin at the bottom here because it's causing everything else to move where it doesn't need to be. And partly that's because all of this is secured now. Before, when I went round, it wasn't. I'm going to double check that because everything's moved. Straighten up the side as you get there. And as I come to the bottom, I'm going to just cut in so I can go around. Now I'm going to work my way, oops, to the other end where I first started the border. Just pushing everything in as I go. My centre mark should be still the centre mark without moving anything. That means if the centre matches like it should, that means all of this has gone in and all of the next side should go in perfectly. Now my second centre mark and the border centre mark all matches, so I'm within my parameters. So now I'm going to just sew to that corner. Now before I go up this last side, I'm going to measure down, make sure that this is the 1.5 inches that I need on the pleat. If I don't get it right, it means going around this corner is not going to be working properly. I'm going to put my pin across like I did before, like that. I'm going to hold everything in place and go around the corner. Pinch it down hard as I get to the bottom of the pleat. And I'm going to just make sure everything's in line again, raw edges to raw edges. And now this is the awkward part because the top is already sewn in. That's the outward arc, almost in place. And as I start coming round this, I've got to start pulling it in like this and let it roll into place. Hopefully, it looks like it's all going to go in. So I'm now pushing the fabric into the cording and then pulling up and around. Do it slowly. There's really not much margin for error on this. Straighten out the fabric from underneath and finish off. And then go around a little way so you overstitch everything. And there we have it, the border. Now, on the front side of the zip, you see where this shape is? I'm going to just pop my fingers in and pull it. Do not do it behind there, ever. Otherwise you've got to start again, because the zip tag is there and you can push that back. I'm going to check all my corners. That could be better. Always check your corners, because they should be really nice and tight. That doesn't look too bad. I think I did quite well. Yeah, not bad. And the next place to check is going around here. Make sure you got it in really tight on both sides. Looks pretty good to me. Now there's no real reason to keep this on here, because the other fabric is quite lightweight. So I'm going to remove this. Now I'm just going to pop this in here. First of all, I'm going to put one side in like this into place, and I'll tip it so I can fold it the way I usually do. So I'm going to fold this up like this and smush it in to the bag, and it should go, because the zip actually comes up nicely on the side, and that's why I put zips that far out. I hate fighting things. Twist it and smush it and smush it and twist it. Everything should just go into place like this. Then just pull it down to the bottom here like this. I think that's going to look okay. The zip side is this on here, so I'm just going to pull that on round. If it doesn't look plump enough, I might put some extra in, but I think it'll be okay. I'll find some stuffing to put in here in a minute, and maybe across the bottom. Now the last thing to do is to go around and check on all of the seams. Make sure that there are no threads that are hanging out. There's one there. And if so, just clip them, but don't clip your seat cushion or your back cushion or any other cushion for that matter. Oh, there's a pin there. That's a bit strange. Some will just pull out and others need to, oops, I'll cut that one, push that one back down. Yeah, I'm going to put some more around here, more stuffing, but as I say, just cut round all of the threads that are hanging out so it looks nice and tidy. Having looked at this, I actually did decide that I needed to put a new cover on it. This is a little bit old, and so I'm just going to catch it all down with a new piece over the top. I'm not going to make a separate cover over the top with curtain fabric. I don't think it needs it, but it does need a little bit of help pushing all of this fluff out again. And I'm just going to start it off here like this. And I've got a little girl sitting on here today helping me in not such a helpful manner. So I'm just over stitching. I've popped that all the way down to the bottom, and I've popped this all the way up here. So it's nice and thick on the bottom here where it was a bit thin. I'm sure when it was first done it was actually very plump. I'm going to sew along here to this corner first. And she might move by the time I get there. Because I wanted a little bit bulky in here, I'm just going to fold that down, cut down to the bottom here and kind of round like that. That will hold that there. So push that down and bring this up. And I'm going to cut around, and that can fold in here like that. That'll be okay. So I'm going to go down the side a little bit, just hold it like this. Actually, I might just go to the corner here, and then I can finish off my thread and then just come up through. Okay, so I'm going to prop that down there. Sometimes you just have to add more batting, oops a daisy, to the projects you're doing, and it's better to do it than for customers or friends to come back and say, excuse me, but this isn't a very good job. It's inconvenient, it's a little bit time consuming, but it's really more the inconvenience of it all. As I get to the corner, all I'm going to do is fold that under and that over, and that will take care of that corner for me. In fact, I might cut it back because it's meant to be a centre seam. I don't really want too much of that to show. I'm just going to take about 1 inch off to the top and carry on sewing. At the top here, I'm going to just cut in to that corner and that corner like that, and just fold that down, and that up, and that will bulk the corner out here at the top of the chair. So that should go in quite nicely. Like I did on the other side, I've just folded that down, folded that up and there, and now I'm just going to catch a few stitches here. In fact, I'm going to start this end just to hold it in place, and then I can go along the top. And then this will bulk out the corners at the top of the cushion, make them will stick out better. And now I'm going to just catch stitch all the way down here, so it holds it in place. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you learnt something from this little project. You don't actually have to put the piping round, I just think it looks nicer to have it around the top and then around the sides, and they're quite easy. Please remember to subscribe and hit the bell button if you want to hear more from me. Some thumbs up would be really good, and then I know how I'm doing. And in the meantime, take care. See you later. Ciao. Come on, get your tail out the way. You don't actually have to put... Cat, you're in the way.